Hey guys, so I'm just going to show you how I got from this table right here to this one right here. So if we look at the original table, we can see it's in many different parts. And so if you look at mine right here, I have it all created from basically three different objects. I have the base of the table, and then I have the two legs. So I'm just going to show you how I modeled that real quick. Go to my center, add a cube. So whenever you're scaling a cube, if you press N to open up this menu right here, you'll be able to see your scale right here. And so that's your local scale basically. So right now it's set to 3, 2, and 0.14. So if we were to try and say bevel all the edges, we can see how this right here is not beveled the same amount as this right here. So the way to fix that is in object mode. You'll go to scale, and you want to Control A and apply scale. So now if you go to bevel all our edges, we have the same amount bevel for all of them. But speaking of bevels, you really don't want to add your bevels onto the mesh directly because it's extremely difficult to remove them if you decide you don't want them later on. So what I do instead is I deselect everything, I go to select menu right here, and then sharp edges. And so from there, I'll press Control E and then mark sharp. And then lastly, I'll increase the mean bevel weight. So what this will do is if we add a bevel modifier, maybe decrease it to about 0.2 or 0.02, increase the segments, up the profile to 0.7, I usually do that, and then increase it to weight. So weight will tell us basically however much we have on this line right here will be how much it bevels. So since it's at 1, it's going to bevel completely the 0.02 width. But let's say we turn it down to 0.5, we can see it bevels only half of that width. So if we turn it back up to 0.1 or to 1.0, we can see that it bevels the whole thing. And so that's just how I do my bevel, so I can always disable it and enable it whenever I want. So now that I've got that created, let's do the leg pieces. So in a separate, in object mode, we're going to add a cube. I want to scale it down to the right proportions that I want to start with, and slowly move it up inside the table. So I'm just going to move this up, and then scale it like that. So now we have a triangle, right? We don't want that. We want something more like this, which, as you can see, it doesn't bevel as much as it should. That's because we need to apply the scale to get that nice bevel going. So in reality, less is more. So you really don't need this many bevels to get the job done. Because if I duplicate that, move it to this layer, and then go back, just do that. Once you see the shading, so once I do my select sharp, mark the sharp, increase the bevel. We also want to go, auto smooth. I forgot about that. We want to add auto smooth, so now this part will be as smooth as it should be. We have change between this one and this one. You're not really getting that much detail, especially if you're going to be in game. So you can see this object alone has 68 tries, but if you go into this, it only has 36. We basically have the tries right here just by using less bevels. So now that we've gotten that, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And one more thing. So what I like to do is I like to use the mirror modifier in this because I know it's going to be the same on both sides. So I'm going to use that mirror modifier on the x-axis, and then click the dropper tool and select my table. Now that's selected, let's go right here. So to create the bottom part of the base, I'm going to extrude, scale X, and scale Y to get that. And then I'm going to extrude on the Z a little bit, just to get that little bump. And then extrude on the Z so I can have those feet coming out. So I'm going to extrude and then scale on the Y. So now I can bevel this edge right here. Like I said before, less is more. So we're probably only going to do about 3 segments, just like that. So we're gonna, for now, we're gonna clear all our sharps and our mean bevel weight because we're gonna do it all in a second. So let's join these together. Whoops, forgot to apply the modifier. Okay, join. We want to, whoops, it's my add-on. We want to clear the sharp, clear the bevel weight. So now we have our table right here. This is what it looks like just on plain smooth shading, right? So now we want to do our, oh, forgot one more thing, ingons, right? We don't want these at all. We want to delete these edges right here. So I'm going to delete those faces. I'm going to select the vertices right here. So we just want triangles to go into this slot right here. So we're going to create a face, see right there, and we're going to deselect and then select again, and do that for the rest of them. And now we have a clear face with no ingons, and that shading error will be fixed as soon as we do our sharp shading. So let's create those faces. I probably should have done this after I applied the mirror modifier, or before I applied the mirror modifier, because now I'll have to do it twice. But since I don't feel like doing that, I will just delete this object, select this object, separate it, and then apply another mirror modifier, delete that bevel. So get the mirror, yep, select that again, X, and now we have those fixed. So we can add it back to this. We're going to delete the bevel for now. So like we did before, whoops, forgot one. Fix these real quick. Okay, so now like we did before, we are going to select the sharp edges. Whoops, got to be in edge mode. So since these are all going to be smooth, I need to make sure none of these edges are selected. So if they are, you want to deselect them. And so once you have all the edges that are going to have a sharp angle, we're just going to, again, mark sharp, increase the bevel weight. Now that we have that, we can go ahead and use our auto smooth. And now we can see our table just looks pretty good by itself. But now we can add a bevel. So let's add that bevel. So we're going to use three segments. And now we also want to use the bevel weight. The bevel weight is going to tell us what parts to bevel and what parts not to bevel, right? Because that's because we use this bevel weight attribute right here. So now that we have that, I'm just going to set this to 0.7 again. I just think it looks good. 0.02, and make sure clamp is on. So now that we have that, let's say we want our table to be beveled more than these, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to select sharp again. And now we just want to go in and we want to deselect all of these edges over here, right? Because we don't want to affect those. We want to tone these down to about 0.5. Now that those are at 0.5, you want to increase this to 0.04. So now our table has a larger bevel than this one. So that's how I created that table. And next, if you just smart UV unpack, probably give it an island margin of like 0.01. That'll just give it space in between them. So that's the island margin right here. So I'm going to increase that up to 0.02. There we are. So now we have a nice clean unwrap here. So if you don't want a square table, we can still basically add the bevels ourselves. So we can remove the mean bevel weight and clear the sharp, and then add our bevel to it. I think that looks pretty good. Cool. So there's our good looking table right there. Awesome.